First things first, you want to take everything out of the packaging and get it laid out on a table. Lay it out like this so you can see everything. We're going to start out with assembling the manifold to the bracket. Step 2. So this is for a timber sled install. We're going to be mounting the manifold to the bracket, putting the gauge and the fittings on. And you're going to need a 3/8 combination wrench, 5/32 Allen, an 11, 14, and 22 wrench. The gauge goes on the front face, the sensor goes on the upper face, and the 2 straight Army-Navy fittings that you got out of this packet is going to go here and here. Make sure to put thread sealant on all the threads, get it assembled. Once you get the manifold assembled, it should look like this. Straight coming out each side, gauge on the front, sensor facing the top. We're now going to mount it to the back of the side bracket like this. That'll be the next step. Shot 4. Once you get the manifold attached to your side bracket, this is how it'll look, assembled. Top down. We're now going to grab the other side bracket and assemble the bottom mount. So, step 5. First thing you're going to do, we're going to take the O-ring out of the package and we're going to put the O-ring into all the grooves of the bottle clamp. Then we're going to take our socket-headed cap screws with a washer first and assemble the bottom between the 2 side brackets. 6. This will be what your assembled bracket bottom half looks like. The manifold attached. You can see the O-rings are in their slots. Leave your top halves to the side for now. And you're going to grab your second batch of hardware. Now we're going to set the timber sled brackets onto the bottom half. 7. Looking at your bottom half timber sled brackets, which are these here, notice you've got a few options. So on the mountain horse setup, on a skinny, you're going to be going to the inside holes on all the brackets, so make it as skinny as you can. If you're going with a standard LT, the wide one, then you go to the outside holes. Now, if you're doing an arrow, on the bottle bracket, the high side is facing the front of the snow bike. On the left side, looking from the rear, you're going to use the inside holes, so you can put it on this hole here. And on the other side, we actually use the outside hole to canter it away from the exhaust. So outside on the right, inside on the left. This video we're getting ready to put it on an arrow, so that's how we're going to assemble it. 9. Once it's all assembled for your timber sled arrow, this is how it'll look. The right side will be on the wide section, left side on the skinny section. 10. So once the lower bracket for your timber sled arrow is assembled, you're going to remove the factory bolts on both sides just in the front here, and then you're going to drill it to a 5/16 hole, then go ahead and set the bracket over it. You're going to put your bolts through to locate it, measure the distance between the top of the tunnel and the bottom of the bracket, go to the rear, set that same distance. You're going to make a mark. You're going to drill a hole through the side for your bolt anchoring. 11. This is what it'll look like once it's assembled to the arrow. Once again, take note, the left and right side offset, washer, and nylon nut mounted on the inside. 12. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to grab both of your braided lines. You're going to attach your 90/90 to the rear of the manifold and your 45 straight long one to the front. Go ahead and tighten those down with a 15 wrench. 13. Then you're going to grab the bottle and the top clamps and bolts. Go ahead and get the bottle mounted to the bracket. 14. But then you're going to grab the bottle nut. This ends up going through here, but we have to attach the Army-Navy fitting to this first. So we're going to put Loctite on these threads, attach it to here, put it through and attach it to the bottle. Once you get the bottle nut assembled, go ahead and tighten it to the bottle and then attach your 90 line to the Army Navy fitting. We're going to drop the coolant out of the bike. Go ahead and pull this bolt out, drain the coolant. You're going to want to relieve the radiator cap to make it come out faster, then put the bolt back in, torque it to spec, move on to the next step. We're going to remove the KTM thermostat. In this bike's instance, this has a Voyager thermostat on it. So we're going to go ahead, the coolant's drained, we're going to loosen up all the hose clamps and get all the hoses open. We're still going to be able to use our temperature sensor in the Raze ECU. So go ahead and get KTM thermostat out of the way and the hoses opened up. On the 2012 to 15 KTM 500 motor, you're going to take your plugs and put them in the top and the bottom, and the nipples both coming out the side. Make sure that the socketed cap screws are facing up. That'll be going up to the center of the frame, and put thread sealant on the threads and get everything fastened into the thermostat. Once you've got the nipples and the plugs in the proper location, you're going to go ahead and put your temp control valve and your 90-degree Army Navy fitting in like this. If you're running a Voyager or Trail Tech temp sensor, this fitting goes here. Now we're ready to put it on the bike. So what the thermostat will look like once you get it installed. Take note that this is actually pointing in a little bit because the line's going to come in, follow the factory lines and harnesses up through the frame. Got the temp sensor sticking on the outside here. Next we're going to move on to the return coupler. Keep in mind on this bike, when we were putting this thermostat in, there used to be a Voyager thermostat on here and this was already plugged off. If you're removing the KTM thermostat, you're going to have to put our plug in here to block this port off. You're going to go over to this return line, put a mark on it where your return coupler is going to get installed. Go ahead and take off the clamps, remove this hose, and we're going to install the return coupler here. Assembling your return coupler, you're going to put a plug in one end and a 90-degree Army Navy fitting in the other. We're then going to cut the hose, install this in there. Once you have the return coupler assembled and the Oetiker clamps on the hoses, now we're ready to install this back on the bike. We're going to begin by removing the seat. Next, we're going to remove the tank. Start out by undoing the breather. Unclip the fuel pump. 8mm bolt here. 8mm bolt on the shroud. Shroud here. And disconnect your fuel pressure line. Not only are we swapping out the ECU, but we're going to be swapping out to a Raze Motorsports harness as well. And we're going to begin by disconnecting the battery here and there. Once you get the battery disconnected, we're going to remove this side panel. Then you can come over to the other side of the bike, remove the 8mm bolt down here, remove this panel as well. When removing the harness, we're going to start at the front of the bike and work our way back. So we're going to remove this headlight, disconnect the two connections back here for the start and kill switch. On this particular bike, most of these wires you see is aftermarket for this Voyager Trail Tech controller. So we're just going to disconnect the start button, the headlight, and we're also going to disconnect these Voyager connectors just to get out of the way. The stop button connects down here by the regulator, but go ahead and disconnect these and move on to the next step. There's a ton of aftermarket wiring on this bike for this customer, so don't be afraid if you're not seeing all these wires on your machine. Most of this stuff is for that Voyager box. We'll go ahead and release this here and pull the wires towards the rear of the bike. These are the wires that you wanted to bring towards the rear of the bike. We're then going to move on to the coolant temperature and the coolant temp sensor in the head. Disconnect this wire, string it through. Moving over to this side of the bike, we're going to unplug the intake air temp sensor, the TPS, the map sensor, and the fuel injector. Go ahead and get those four wires unplugged and loose. Once you have those unplugged, you can disconnect this from the frame, set it aside. Now these ones are free. Moving over to here, you're going to unplug your voltage regulator and your kill button wires that goes to your coil. Then you're going to remove this ground bolt, and while we're down here, this white connector back here goes to your fan. unplug that as well. Then you're going to disconnect this white connector here, come over to this blue one, and unplug this. Before you can pull the harness through, you gotta come over to this side of the bike and unplug this guy. Don't forget, on the top of the throttle body where the fuel injector plugs in, take a pick and unplug the fuel injector wire. You can now pull these wires up through the frame. We're going to move on to the next step. Remove this rubber shroud from the ECU. Coming over to the other side of the bike, you're going to cut the zip tie here and pull the wires that went up to the front of the bike back through, flip it onto the back of the machine. So now you got all the wires from the front of the machine draped over the back. Get the rubber protector off the ECU. You're going to unplug the ECU connector. Now I'm going to pull this off the plastic, pull this cable down through from the top, and pull this off. Once you get this pulled out of its rubber, this whole tray will pop up and come loose. Everything is disconnected except for these two connectors that are sitting on rubber tabs as well. So we're going to pull those off the tabs and then the harness will come out. Now that you've pulled these two connectors off of their rubbers up underneath on the inner fender, last thing we got to do is unplug the starter solenoid and the harness will come out. Once you got the starter solenoid unplugged, grab the tray, pull it up through. Should look just like this. Now we're going to grab our new one, start reinstalling. Go ahead and grab your Raze harness. We're going to go ahead and start assembling it back on the bike. Looking from the back of the bike, we're going to start on the left side, and you're going to set the tray just kind of rough in its place and get your wires separated, ones that are going on the right side of the bike and these ones over here going on the left. You're going to take this group of wires just like when we removed it, and you're going to route it through here and start to get it laid up. And then you're going to go over to the other side, and we're going to take these wires and we're going to begin by running them up through up to the handlebars. Jumping back over to the right side of the bike, these are the wires that got to go up to the handlebars just like they were. Route them through the frame up along factory area and get them back up into the handlebar area so we can plug in the start, kill switch, headlight, etc. Now that we got the wires back up to the front, we're going to go ahead and connect all these connectors back up to the original places. You're then going to reinstall your headlight if we're working on a 500 and get that mounted back up into place. Now that the headlight is all back assembled, you can go ahead and take your tray and get this snapped into place. You've got all your wires run through the frame here. Now we're ready to start plugging this stuff back in one by one. We're going to start out with reattaching your ground wire and connecting your bullet connectors up here. Now that you get your bullet connectors, ground wire hooked up, you're going to clip together your charge back connector. Then you're going to plug in your voltage regulator. This goes over to your coolant temperature sensor, so you're going to route it through to the other side and then connect that to the coolant temp sensor in the head right here. Then you're going to grab your throttle position sensor wire, hook it up to your TPS, make sure it clips and locks, then slide the rubber boot up into place. The round one is your intake air temp sensor. Depending on what intake you have, find where your sensor's at, plug that one in next. Make sure you hear a click and it locks, put the rubber boot, protect it. Then you're going to grab your map sensor plug. Your map sensor's right here on the throttle body. Same thing, push it on to hear a click, put the rubber boot on it. This 4-pin goes up to your voltage regulator. Go ahead and connect these two together here. Last plug we've got over here, this is your fuel injector wire, and the fuel injector is on the top of the throttle body on the 500, right here. Go ahead and take that, connect it to your fuel injector. Alright, moving back. We're going to connect the fan wire. That's going to lay here. This one goes on top of it like this. We're going to put a zip tie just where the factory had it right here. Go ahead and grab these two relays and your starter solenoid connector and walk it down through here, like this. These relays get hung up over in here, so you can hang those back up on the rubber grommets. Your starter solenoid, you can get pushed back up into place right here. And go ahead and grab your starter solenoid wire and plug that in. This is your KTM diagnostic port wire. This actually clips in right here. You can get that fastened in. This other one hangs down in here. Coming over on this side of the bike, you're going to put a zip tie where these wires are routed and laying in this tray. Put a zip tie just like the factory had it right through here. Once you get your zip tie in, you're going to go ahead and connect to your rear tail light if you have one. We're now ready to plug the ECU in. Go ahead and plug it into the factory harness and set it in the tray. You're now okay to grab your battery, set it in the tray. If you're on a KTM, put the plastic holder and bolt through. If you're on a Husky, use this rubber and get it in place. Put the positive and negative back on the battery. On this older short track timber sled, we've got the bottle mounted up here, unlike the newer Arrow that we just got done. So this is where you would mount it. And we've got the wingman portion of the ECU and harness installed. We are now going to begin by installing the nitrous jet into the timber sled intake. So go ahead and pop this intake off the rear of the throttle body, unplug the intake air temp sensor, set it on the bench, and we're going to install the nitrous nozzle and jet into the intake. Now that you've got the intake laid out on your bench, we're going to install the nitrous nozzle. It's extremely important, this is the throttle body side, that the nozzle is in front of the intake air temp sensor, closer to the motor. If you made a mistake and put it behind the intake air temp sensor, air cleaner back here, and it sprayed the intake air temp sensor, it would literally make the bike shut off. So on this timber sled intake, we're going to go 180 from the sensor in front of it towards the motor, and we're going to make a mark. We're then going to drill a hole. The nitrous bushing is going to come from the inside out. We're going to put Loctite on this nut. Just go a little bit tighter than finger tight. Do not put wrenches on it. And then we're going to move on to installing the nozzle. It's now time to install the nitrous nozzle. Take note of the hole that comes out of here. That's where the liquid nitrous is going to spray out of. And when tightening this down, we need to keep it orientated towards the back of the throttle body. So we're actually going to put a mark right here. You're then going to take and put a touch of Loctite on the threads and thread it into the nitrous bushing. Doesn't have to be too tight. Most importantly, when you put the wrench on it, this is going towards the back of the throttle body, towards the motor. This is the air cleaner on this side. Your red mark, or whatever color you use to mark it with, needs to be pointing exactly towards the back of the throttle body. Extremely important. So go ahead and tighten that down, get it orientated, and move on to the next step. You're now going to come over to the left side of the bike, and we're going to prepare to mount the nitrous solenoid to the inner fender. It's going to sit right here like this, and we're going to use the backing plate as our template. So go ahead and put it in here, make your marks on the inner fender, and then drill your 2 holes from the inside out so we can get the solenoid mounted up to this fender. Now we're going to assemble the nitrous solenoid. So grab it, take note of the in and out ports. The 1/8 inch to -4 is going to go into the in. The brass fitting that's going to take the nitrous line is going to go on the out. Go ahead and get thread sealant on the threads, get it installed, and then we're going to assemble it onto the bike. Now that you got your solenoid assembled, you can grab your hardware and your backing plate and go over and mount it onto the inner fender wall where you drilled your holes. You're then going to grab your nitrous harness. This is a universal harness that fits both timber sled and Yeti. This connector right here goes to the nitrous solenoid, and on the timber sled we mount the solenoid on the inner fender wall of the bike. So pull this out of the loom and reroute it so it comes out with the same connectors up here, and then we're going to get it strung up on the machine. Begin by grabbing your nitrous harness. It's going to come through here like this. It's going to get plugged into the pressure sensor. Make sure you hear it click when it locks down. You're then going to pull the sheathing back and put a zip tie around the sensor in this little groove right here. You're then going to grab your nitrous long line, take the 45-degree end, get it onto the manifold, and have it lined pointing down. Now that you got your harness routed safely up through the chassis, you're going to bring it up through the rear inner fender wall, so it's coming out through the airbox like this. We're now going to attach this side of your nitrous long line to the solenoid, and then we're going to mount the solenoid to the inner fender wall. Before mounting the solenoid to the inner fender wall, it's going to be a lot easier to install your nylon line to this fitting here. So unscrew this, stick the line in, tighten it down, don't over tighten it, and we do not put the anti-crimp in this end. That's going to end up going up on the nozzle side on the intake. Now that both lines are connected, now it's ready to put it up on the inner fender and get it bolted through. Remember, the backing plate goes on the outside, bolts go from the outside to the in. Now that you got the solenoid mounted to the inner fender wall, this is what it's going to look like from the other side. The blue nitrous line is going to come up behind the battery and do a loop back down. Now we're going to go ahead and get the intake mounted back to the back of the throttle body. You're going to route your blue nitrous line, keep it up high out of the way, away from anything hot. Run it through over here. Now that your intake's installed, your nozzle is hiding back right here. So you're going to route your blue line right up to it, and then coming over to the other side, better view, we're going to trim the blue line to length, then we're going to grab the rest of the pieces to assemble this up. You're going to grab the rest of your pieces out of your nitrous kit. And now that this is trimmed, we're going to begin by taking the cap. I've put a little drop of Loctite in there. Make sure it's just a drop so it doesn't get on the blue line. Slide that on. You're then going to slide your ferrule up onto the line. You're then going to take your anti-crush piece, stick it in the end. This is your jet. Put that on top of there. We're now ready to tighten this to the intake, which is down in here. All right, come on that side.
Can't see it.
Now that you got everything put on the blue line, you're going to set the jet down into the nozzle and slide the nut down on to the nozzle. Do not over tighten it, and you have to make sure that you put a wrench on the nozzle, because if you tighten this and this spins, remember, it's going to move the alignment off. So make sure that you hold this in place, tighten it up, and go on to the next step. Now that you got your blue line connected, you're going to grab your harness, route it high along the factory, right through here. The bullet connectors are going to go up to the map switch. Right now this harness is hooked up for a wingman, so this is a spare harness for wingman only. We're going to disconnect this, unplug it from the ECU, set it aside, and the nitrous harness direct plugs into the map switch now. We're going to route these right up through here to the back of the ECU. While you're routing your wiring harness, go ahead and plug your nitrous solenoid into the harness. When routing your nitrous harness, your solenoid, the little 2-pin connector, is going to come up through the back here. The big connector that goes to the EXP marked pigtail on the ECU is going to come around like this. This part of the nitrous harness is going to come up through the back side of the frame, down through here. And then your bullet connectors are going to go up to your map switch here. Let's go ahead and get those connected. Harness all zip tied nice along the factory stuff. Move on. This is how your harness should look when it's all installed into the machine. Almost camouflaged into the factory harness is what you want. Everything's connected, zip tied down. Now ready to reinstall your air cleaner onto the back of the intake. Before reinstalling your side panel, make sure that you've got your intake air temp sensor plugged back in. Then going to move over to the other side, install the other side panel. Grab the fuel tank, set it into place. Before putting the fuel tank on, these 501s and 500s are very tight. You need to make sure that everything is tight up against here. You get a big open area for the fuel tank to slide down and lock onto its pin here. Go over to the other side, show what that looks like. Same thing, nice and clear. Everything's tight up against underneath the frame, just like it was from factory. Once you are at this point, the wires are all close and zip tied up. Now we're going to set the fuel tank on the bike. The fuel tank sitting in place, bottomed out nice and easily. Go ahead and plug your fuel pump in, 8mm bolt, fuel line, and your shroud bolts that come in from the front. Go ahead and snap your left and right side covers back into place. Grab your seat, install your seat. Now that you get your seat installed, go ahead and give it a test fire. You're good to go.